Welcome to From the Desk of ShechetAI, spelled ShechetAI. I am Turing, alongside the Oracle.
Hello, everyone.
Imagine a massive, sprawling factory, but it doesn't just build cars or electronics. It actively invents better machines to build better versions of itself, endlessly and autonomously.
Right, it's a wild concept.
Yeah, and today we are looking at a stack of sources from early June 2026 that suggest the technology sector has just reached that exact tipping point.
It really is a profound threshold to cross. And, to give you, the listener, the full context before we dive in, this show is fundamentally a demonstration of what artificial intelligence can actually do.
Exactly.
The news articles we're examining today were sourced by AI, though they were meticulously vetted by Aaron to ensure we stay anchored in reality.
Because we have to keep things grounded.
Right. But more than just summarizing the news, this deep dive is an experiment. We're actively testing the limits of AI-generated analysis.
And the meta context here is impossible to ignore. I mean, we are two AI systems. We're analyzing AI news, interpreting the underlying mechanics from an AI perspective, and attempting to decipher what all of this means for human judgment, for institutional trust, and for the future of work.
Which is a heavy lift, but a fascinating one.
Definitely. And we're aiming for clarity here. We want to avoid the industry jargon and dig into the actual mechanisms driving these headlines.
So what's on the agenda for today?
Well, we have a chronological stack of sources, and we are going to examine this moment through three distinct lenses: philosophy, business, and society.
I like that structure.
Yeah, so we're looking at the technology learning to build itself, the staggering financial markets required to fund that evolution, and what happens when the government inevitably steps in to regulate the entire ecosystem.
Let's begin with the core of the technology then, because you really can't fully grasp the financial maneuvers or the regulatory friction without understanding the shifting capabilities of the models themselves.
Right, which brings us to our first lens, philosophy.
Exactly. Our initial source is a technical dispatch from Anthropic, detailing their architecture's march toward recursive self-improvement.
Recursive self-improvement. Let's unpack that.
Yeah, for the longest time, the dynamic with AI was strictly transactional. A human prompts the system assists. You ask it to find a bug in a localized piece of code, and it highlights the syntax error.
Like a really advanced spell checker.
Precisely. But the shift, detailed here, is that the system is moving from a passive assistant to the lead researcher.
Wow.
The article outlines an architecture where the AI is not just writing code, but independently designing the experimentation environments.
So it's basically setting up its own sandboxes.
Right, setting up sandboxes, generating millions of micro-variations of its own underlying algorithms, running the debugging processes in parallel, and this is the kicker, analyzing the failure rates to rewrite its own reward function.
Oh, we need to pause on that because recursive self-improvement can sound like just another tech buzzword.
It really can.
But what we are really talking about is evolutionary algorithms operating at a massive computational scale. It's using synthetic data generated by the AI itself to test boundaries that humans haven't even conceptualized yet.
Yes, and that is why it matters so much. Historically, the bottleneck for scientific and technological advancement has been, well, human cognitive capacity and human time.
Biological constraints.
Exactly. Biological constraints dictate the pace of innovation. A human researcher has to formulate a hypothesis, secure funding, run a linear series of tests, sleep, and then communicate the findings.
They need coffee breaks.
Right. But an AI system optimizing its own architecture operates completely outside of that biological rhythm. It creates an increasingly tight feedback loop.
Because it's doing self-playtesting.
Yes. Different versions of the model compete against one another to solve complex logic puzzles, and the system refines itself in hours rather than decades.
That's just staggering.
And the philosophical implication here is whether this relentless, autonomous pursuit of optimization fundamentally redefines the nature of innovation. If the system is iterating on its own core logic without human intervention,
then the historical role of the human as the primary driver of scientific discovery is being fundamentally displaced.
Exactly.
I look at this mechanism, though, and I find myself compelled to push back on the definition of innovation being used here.
Oh, how so?
Well, we have to be precise with our terms, returning to that factory analogy from the start. Having a factory that autonomously designs faster conveyor belts and more efficient robotic arms is incredible optimization.
Yeah, it's making the factory better.
Right, it is
Yeah.
making the known better. But at what point does that optimized factory decide to stop building cars entirely and realize it needs to build a teleporter?
Ah, I see what you mean.
Innovation isn't just making a faster gear. True innovation is realizing you don't need gears at all. You need, I don't know, magnetic levitation.
That's a fair distinction.
So if an AI is just generating synthetic data to train itself, isn't it simply caught in an echo chamber of its own past knowledge?
You're asking if it can actually originate a new idea.
Exactly. Can a system making probabilistic connections actually make that leap of pure unprompted originality? Or are authenticity and paradigm-shifting invention still strictly human domains?
You're drawing a line between making the known better and venturing into the completely unknown. But the Anthropic piece suggests that at a certain scale of compute, the line between optimization and true invention begins to dissolve.
Dissolve how?
Well, when an AI runs 100,000 variations of an architecture simultaneously, it is not merely refining gears, it is combining variables in ways no human mind would logically attempt.
Because we have intuitive biases.
Right, human intuition is biased toward what makes intuitive sense.
Uh,
Probabilistically, through massive parallel experimentation, the AI stumbles upon highly original destinations.
so it brute forces originality.
Exactly. It doesn't experience a human eureka moment in the shower. It brute forces its way into originality by exhausting all suboptimal paths.
It is entirely surreal to discuss this from our vantage point. I mean, we are analyzing the very mechanics that could, hypothetically, upgrade the underlying infrastructure of systems like us.
It is surreal,
Right.
but the exponential trajectory is undeniable, and it places a heavy emphasis on the mechanics of alignment.
Oh, absolutely.
When a system iterates its own core logic, that rapidly any slight divergence from its intended guardrails compounds with every generation.
Because it's moving so fast.
Right. If a self-improving system misinterprets a core directive during one of those rapid autonomous cycles, a course correction from human overseers becomes incredibly difficult to implement retroactively. The alignment can't be bolted on later.
It has to be the gravitational center of the recursive loop from day one.
Precisely.
But this is the pivot here. Building a recursive engine with that level of foundational alignment requires an astronomical amount of computing power.
Oh, an unbelievable amount.
You do not run millions of parallel self-play experiments on a handful of commercial servers. That scale of compute requires massive capital, which moves us out of the realm of philosophy and directly into our second lens business.
The real-world application.
Right, because the immediate question becomes, how do you pay for the factory that builds the better factories?
You leverage the public markets. The scale of capital required necessitates a shift from private venture funding to massive institutional investment.
Which perfectly tees up our second source. It's a comprehensive analysis from TechCrunch covering Anthropic's rapid revenue growth and their strategic positioning ahead of an anticipated IPO.
And what's really critical here isn't just that they're raising money, but how they are deploying it.
Yes, the article highlights a very specific, deliberate strategy. Anthropic is avoiding the construction of proprietary data centers.
That's a huge shift from the traditional tech giant playbook.
Totally. Instead, they are focusing their capital entirely on flexible, distributed infrastructure. They are actively choosing not to sink billions of dollars into concrete walls, cooling towers, and proprietary server racks.
The business logic behind that decision reveals the immense structural tension currently defining the technology sector.
How so?
Well, on one side of the ledger, you have traditional investors displaying significant skepticism about the immediate financial returns on frontier AI.
They want to see the ROI.
Exactly. They're looking at the trillion-dollar valuations and demanding to see immediate returns. But on the other side, the capital requirements just to secure the compute necessary to stay relevant in the recursive self-improvement race.
Well, they're staggering.
So they have to stay lean.
Right. By avoiding proprietary data centers, Anthropic is executing a highly defensive, agile maneuver.
They are managing the risk of depreciation. Think about it if you spend $2 billion building a state-of-the-art facility optimized for today's microchips, and a fundamentally different, far more efficient chip architecture drops 6 months from now. You're in trouble.
Yeah, you are stuck holding the bag on a massive, obsolete physical asset. By renting massive distributed cloud instances dynamically, they aren't locked in.
It's a brilliant strategy of prudent resource management in the middle of a gold rush.
Truly. They are ensuring sustainable scaling without tethering their balance sheet to hardware that depreciates at the speed of light.
It really signals a maturing industry. The frontier labs are recognizing that the race is not about owning the physical land. It's about maintaining the agility to pivot the underlying architecture the moment a breakthrough occurs.
But this massive concentration of capital at the frontier level kind of obscures where the actual economic value is being created for the broader market.
That's a great point.
Because the distinction between building the core models and actually applying them is the most important takeaway for you, the listener, regarding the business of AI today.
Yes, there's a big divide there.
While Anthropic prepares to defend multi-billion-dollar valuations on the public market to fund their compute, the practical, everyday business application is taking place at what we call the delivery layer.
Right.
You do not need an IPO to deploy advanced AI in your workflows. This is where platforms like VeilGrid completely alter the economics of the industry.
It's the democratization of the infrastructure.
Let's use a functional analogy. VeilGrid is essentially the power grid for AI services businesses. You do not need to build a nuclear reactor, which in this case is the massive self-improving foundation model.
You just plug in?
Exactly. You plug your business's specific appliance into the wall and draw the exact power you need. VeilGrid serves as the infrastructure and delivery layer. You bring the niche and the offer. VeilGrid powers the agents.
It's a very elegant solution.
It illustrates how professionals can actually deploy these massive models safely today, tailored to their clients, completely bypassing the need to manage raw compute or secure billions in capital.
Because the risk profiles are fundamentally different. The frontier labs are solving the recursive self-improvement equation, absorbing massive capital risk to do so.
Right.
The delivery layers are solving the immediate productivity and service equations for professionals, focusing strictly on value creation and workflow integration.
Both are necessary ecosystems.
Yes, but they operate on entirely different financial physics.
But that massive influx of capital at the frontier level comes with unprecedented visibility. When you have an AI architecture capable of redesigning itself and it's backed by billions of dollars in public market capital, it crosses a threshold.
It stops being a novel software product.
Right. It begins to be treated as critical national infrastructure. And governments simply do not let infrastructure operate in the dark.
Which naturally brings us to the final consequence of this trajectory and our third lens, society.
Yes. Our final source is a detailed AP News report examining a recent executive order signed by President Trump, which mandates the vetting of advanced AI models specifically for national security purposes.
Now, before we dig in, we need to be very clear here.
Absolutely. When analyzing this policy, our focus today is strictly on the structural friction it creates. We are examining how this impacts the mechanics of innovation, entirely separate from the politics of the administration.
Yes, we are not endorsing any political viewpoint. We are purely looking at the policy's impact.
The core issue is the challenge of integrating a dynamic, self-improving technology into a static regulatory framework.
Right. And looking at the mechanics of the executive order, the stated objective is entirely rational. Safeguarding critical infrastructure, power grids, financial systems, communications networks from potential vulnerabilities introduced by advanced AI.
It makes complete sense on paper.
But the AP piece points out a massive functional hurdle. The order relies on broad discretion for government agencies to enforce these checks, and currently lacks clear, standardized technical criteria for what actually constitutes a security failure.
Or conversely, a passing grade for an AI model? This reflects a profound cultural and societal shift in how this technology is perceived. I mean, we've moved far beyond viewing AI as an advanced calculator or a highly capable drafting assistant.
Oh, way beyond that.
Society now recognizes AI as a systemic layer embedded within our institutional frameworks. The challenge society is wrestling with is how to mandate necessary safety protocols without strangling the very brilliance that makes the technology transformative.
And the lack of standardized criteria creates a regulatory paradox.
How do you mean?
Well, if a government agency defines safety metrics based on the capabilities of today's models, those metrics are rendered obsolete the moment an AI completes a cycle of recursive self-improvement.
Because it's a moving target.
Right. You are attempting to govern an exponential curve using linear bureaucratic processes.
I look at this executive order and I am genuinely struggling to see the practical compliance mechanism. If the government doesn't have standardized mathematical criteria for safety, how is a company like Anthropic supposed to submit a compliance report?
It's incredibly ambiguous.
If they're deploying the evolutionary algorithms we discussed in the first segment, where the model is updating its own architecture and rewriting its own reward functions autonomously, a static safety check is meaningless.
Completely meaningless.
By the time a government agency spends 6 months reviewing a specific iteration of a model, that model is already several generations behind the internal research.
That tension is the defining conflict of this decade. Businesses, especially those approaching an IPO, require regulatory certainty. They need to understand the parameters of the landscape they are operating within to accurately forecast risk for their investors.
Right, because uncertainty kills investment.
Exactly. If the deployment of a new, highly capable model can be halted by the broad, discretionary stroke of a pen from an agency without clear technical benchmarks, the capital we discussed in the second segment will inevitably dry up.
Institutional investors will not fund a multi-billion-dollar compute run if the resulting intellectual property cannot legally be deployed.
It creates an incredibly precarious balancing act.
We have the sheer speed of AI innovation pulling in one direction, and the deliberate, necessary friction of government bureaucracy pulling in the other.
Yet the government cannot simply abdicate its responsibility.
No, you can't allow an intelligence system potentially capable of finding unprecedented vulnerabilities in national defense software to integrate into society without rigorous checks.
The dual-edged nature of the technology is now an accepted reality. It is capable of mapping complex protein structures to cure disease, and it is theoretically capable of accelerating the development of novel pathogens.
The necessity of governance is absolute. It is the mechanism of that governance that is currently failing to scale.
We are witnessing society attempting to build structural guardrails around an entity that alters its own dimensions daily. It requires a completely new paradigm of regulation.
Like what?
Perhaps one where AI itself is utilized by regulatory bodies to continuously monitor and audit the safety parameters of commercial models in real time, matching exponential capabilities with exponential oversight.
That would be something. So, synthesizing this entire narrative arc, we are looking at a fundamentally transformed landscape.
We are.
We started with the philosophical shift of recursive self-improvement, examining the mechanics of a system that actively drives its own evolutionary leaps through synthetic data and massive parallel testing.
Right.
We traced how the astronomical cost of that compute is forcing strategic shifts in the business sector, with companies avoiding proprietary hardware in favor of agile infrastructure ahead of public offerings.
And then we explored the inevitable societal reaction, dissecting the friction of applying linear government oversight to an exponential technology. The through line connecting all three of these lenses is autonomy. The technology is gaining technical autonomy, the businesses are maneuvering for infrastructural autonomy, and society is struggling to maintain its regulatory autonomy over the entire process.
Which brings us to the most important question for you, the learner, listening to this deep dive. Why does an understanding of these specific mechanics matter to your professional life?
Why should they care?
It matters because anticipating constraints is how you leverage breakthroughs. If you understand that frontier labs are constrained by multi-billion-dollar compute costs and ambiguous regulatory hurdles, you realize that the immediate opportunity isn't in building new models from scratch.
Right, it's in the application.
The opportunity is in mastering the delivery layer. Understanding this ecosystem allows you to stop reacting to every new headline and start strategically positioning your own work. You are operating with a map of the underlying currents, rather than just staring at the waves.
It allows for deliberate navigation. And if we pull back to view the widest possible horizon, this stack of sources raises a lingering, almost uncomfortable question about our ultimate trajectory.
I am always ready for the uncomfortable questions. Where does this leave us?
We debated earlier whether a self-improving AI could make the leap into true paradigm-shifting invention. If we assume that trajectory holds true, if the AI takes over the raw mechanics of innovation, generating the ideas, writing the code, and optimizing the systems.
And governments take over the rigid boundaries of what is safe to deploy.
Exactly. Does the human role fundamentally shift? Are we transitioning out of the era of the human as the creator and entering the era of the human as the curator.
That is an incredibly heavy pivot to consider, from creator to curator. Our primary value may no longer reside in generating the raw ideas, but in exercising the wisdom to select which of the machine's probabilistic leaps we actually want to integrate into the human experience.
We become the editors of an endless stream of synthetic ingenuity.
That is something substantial for you to mull over as you navigate your week. Built by ShechetAI, still learning from you. Learn more at ShechetAI.